local repository can only be matched to one online Git repository. So I will only go through setting up the repository on GitHub, and you will notice that this same kind of commands would be required if you want to set up your local repository to be mirrored on a repository on GitHub. So on GitHub, if you log into your account, you would see something like this in your home page. You can go to the right-hand side where there's a plus sign and then click on that to create a new repository, or just click on this button here to say new repository. And then when that comes up, I can simply say git test, and then again, as a reminder, please make that a private repository. Most of these providers allow you to now store private repositories online, so why make them public unless you really want to share it with other people? So I would strongly urge you to keep your repositories private for the moment, unless if you're working with a team. I should remind you that at this moment, GitHub supports private repositories only for those subscribers who pay for their GitHub account. So it is not available for subscribers who are using their free account. So simply click on private and then create repository, and then that will create a repository, and then you would see that GitHub also gives me a bunch of commands here on how to set up the repository. So for creating a new repository on the command line, the commands that we actually had done earlier, or to push an existing repository, the same two kinds of commands that have to be issued. So that basically sets up your GitHub repository to mirror your local repository. So since I have already linked my repository to Bitbucket, I'm not going to use my GitHub repository for that purpose. So as you notice, the procedure is pretty much similar on either one of them. Give and take a few differences in the way the information is rendered on the screen in the user interface, and a little bit of changes. More or less, they are similar in the way you're going to make use of them in terms of mirroring your local Git repository to the online repository here. So with this, suppose somebody gives you a Git repository. Can you make a copy of that onto your local one? So this is where we use another Git command called git clone. So now here you see that I have this git test repository. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this repository and then copy this URL. And then I'll show you how I can create a copy of the Git repository or clone this online repository into my local computer. So let's pretend that I am on a different computer, and then we'll go to our command line and then create another repository with that same name. Going to my command line, I'm just going to move up into my, and you see that I have my git test folder there. So I'm going to create another temporary folder here, just to show you that I can clone an online Git repository. So in my temporary folder, you see that it is empty. So to review the command, it says git clone and the repository's URL. So let's apply this command and then clone the online Git repository, pretending that we are on another computer. So I'm going to say git clone and then paste the URL of my Bitbucket repository here, and then you would see that that repository will now get cloned into a local folder with the same name, git test. So now if I do a listing of the directory, you can see that the git test folder has been created. So let's go to the git test folder, and then you will see that this is an exact copy